There was, and you know it very well, a culture that swept up the world, one of the four kingdoms in Daniel's dreams, in Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, one of these powerhouse, influential kingdoms, and it wasn't just a kingdom, it was a culture unto itself called the Greeks. You know about it. We're coming up soon on Chanukah, right? The reason why every year we continue to have Chanukah as a built-in celebration is because we never got over the Greeks. You may not realize it, but many of your lives are Western. Many of your values are influenced by the Western world. The Western world is an extension of the Greek culture, something that's unfortunately too familiar to us. People who live for self-indulgence, eat, drink, and be merry, tomorrow we're going to die. That's actually, it grows right out of the Greek culture. Greek culture captivated the world. We can't overstate it, really. And the Jews are not immune. Jews are also built with the Yetzer, and quite the contrary. The bigger the tzaddik, the bigger the greater the Yetzer. So the Jews were holding on a certain level, but Alexander the Great came and conquered the world. And to a certain degree, there's a very famous story of in the Gemara in Yuma of Alexander the Great meeting up with our host, namely, who lives down the street from us, or who's buried down the street from us? Shimon HaTzadik, name of the street of Or Sameach, Shimon HaTzadik. Yeah, so he had this great famous confrontation with Alexander the Great. He charms Alexander, who's really on a mission to kill him, but he spares him, and then some. He kills our enemies, the Kutim. And so we make friends with Alexander, and that's a fair weather friend you really don't want to have because the Greeks totally influenced us. And the Jews started living between the worlds, and really you can't give a proper answer to your question until you address...
The Greeks went into Israel for how long?
They came in and they never left. They're still alive and well, and they're with you every time you go and build unnecessary muscle in the gym. Yeah?
Wasn't Alexander the Great like the only person who actually made it to the gates of like Gan Eden? You heard a story about that? Like,
give me a source.
I don't know, but they gave him like an eye, and then he weighed the eye and the gold. And
Do you have a Chazal source for that? I'll tell you. As far as our enemies go, he really isn't one of the worst. Quite the contrary. He was pretty nice to the Jews. Shimon HaTzadik charmed him, correctly so. And for as big and bad of a brute as he was, he only lived 32 years, Alexander.
He got down to the Kohen when he came to...
The Kohen was Shimon HaTzadik. Yeah. Same story, correct. You know the story. But the problem is of having friends like that, it's sort of like being friends with Donald Trump. You know, he's got great policies and kind of helpful to the Jews. His mitos are deplorable. It's the same kind of a double bind Jews find themselves in. We're better off. We really have a Kiddush Baruch Hu. We should depend on him. We shouldn't really team up with such people.
But don't we say like this is what Kiddush Baruch Hu is sending us?
Yeah. We should upgrade it and theoretically be better than that. But you know, there's a reason why the Torah warns us, and actually it's a mitzvah d'oraisa called B'chukoseim lo selechu. Don't walk in the statutes, and not just the statutes. Don't walk in the ways of the non-Jews, because sometimes what they do and really what they think and how they practice is antithetical to everything we believe in. And as much as we like to think of ourselves as being individually strong and intellectually rigorous, and we can I can hear all these ideas, Rabbi, and I can still hold my convictions very strongly. Yeah, well, we delude ourselves, and we're not all that strong, and these foreign ideas creep in, and that's why Chazal forbade, among other things, Chochma Yavanis, a certain wisdom of the Greek world. But really what it is that the Greek world promised a great life. This is my newest song. It's about this. The Greeks did this. They built a whole cosmology of gods and goddesses. You ever study the gods and goddesses of the Greeks? Mm-hmm. This is brilliant. Hanania, stay with me. I'm answering your question. The gods and goddesses, sit up. The gods and goddesses built this entire cosmology of these vile beings, like Kronos. I'm actually singing. I'm saying the lyrics of my song. Like Kronos, who ate his own children, except for one. That's homicidal Zeus, right? Who killed in the tens of thousands. There's Athena over there, and she turned Arachne into a spider, and on and on and on. Now, think about what does that do? If these are the gods and goddesses, small g's, all of them, but still you have like a whole cosmos that these are the greater forces out there. Well, I'm just flesh and blood as a human being. You can't hold me to a higher standard. It gives total justification for people's sins. You don't have to be moral in a universe that the gods themselves are immoral. What happened was the Greeks presented a lifestyle that was so new and fresh and novel, where you could eat and drink, be merry, indulge your Yetzer, and every whim, everything that you possibly want, and even a lot more. But then the Jews had a problem with that because they were becoming very Greek in their value system. But then they went home and they had something that we call very healthy. The Western world doesn't like it because the Greek world doesn't like it, and that's called guilt. Right? We'd come home and we have the Torah saying, you're better than that, and you're bigger than that, and you should beat your Yetzer Hara. Ezu Gibor, who's a strong man? Mishnah 4th Perek Pirkei Avos. Hakovish is Yitzro. That's our theme song. Right? We try to conquer Yetzer Hara. The Greeks say, embrace your inner Yetzer Hara. You're born this way. Love yourself for your desires. That's the Western world too. The Jews start with Hashem, who sets the gold bar, the gold standard, very, very high. Okay, we can't reach that. I can't be one of these Tzedukim. It's like beyond me. Fine, but I have no excuse not to be the biggest tzaddik that I can personally become. Why are you not Zusha? The famous story, the Hasidic story about Zusha. Why I have to be as good as I can be, and I can't just justify being mediocre. We said that in one of our classes recently. A Jew's not allowed to be mediocre. You have to be excellent spiritually in every possible way. This came to a peak early on. The first gadol with a Greek name. That's how deeply they infiltrated our system. Was Shimon HaTzadik's own student. Who knows the first chapter of Pirkei Avos? Who is Shimon HaTzadik's own student, who is the next link in the chain of our Masorah, of our holy tradition? Antigonus Isocho. Who taught? Do you know this? Some people know Pirkei Avos. You should memorize it. You should not be like a servant. Don't be like a servant who serves almanas lekabel pras in order to get a reward. Ella, rather, you should be like a servant who doesn't want to get a reward. He taught profoundly, because if you really are grateful, and that's, of course, the key word you need for happiness in life and for have a decent life is gratitude, what most people don't have nowadays, because most people grow up entitled. That's why they walk into the lunchroom and they say, you call this food? Right? And they go out and they spend too much money on expensive food instead because they're entitled to something better, because I don't know why, they just are. Right? But we're just grateful. So if you start with that basic assumption, then you just want to be a servant who's just so grateful to Hashem. Thank you for making me alive every day, because I died last night and I'm coming back right now. And so what can I do for you? That's what he's trying to teach. You can't even call them students. They were barely sitting in the back row, two guys half listening. You know people like this, right? Their names were, significant names, Tzadok and Baitus. You can read all about this in Avos Rabbi Nassan. That's where the story is brought down in Breises. And they were half listening, and one of them said to the other one, hey, you hear what he just said? You have to be like a servant. You're not doing it for receiving a reward. You know what he's saying? There's no reward and punishment in this world. What? Antigonus didn't say that. Yeah, well, they were hearing what they wanted to hear, like the Greeks, right? They conveniently, selectively listened. And they said, oh, no reward and punishment. Well, there's no afterlife either. It's all about here and now and having fun. They went out and started, for the first time in Jewish history, something called sects, S-E-C-T, right? A sect, denominations, different, what they called brands of Judaism. Tzadok started, really logically, what was the name of his group? Named after him, Tzedukim. In English, you say Sadducees. You don't know the story? It's a whole long story. It's sad, you see. The Tzedukim.
They took everything like literal, no? Or something like that?
Well, no. More complicated than that. They felt that they were even more intellectual and complex than the main rabbinic Jews, who they slapped a label on them. They called them Prushim, Pharisees, even though the main standard Jews didn't accept that label. I don't like the label Orthodox either. I'm just a normal Jew, as were these establishment Jews. But the other sects made the religious Jews into religious Jews as a sect themselves. You understand what I'm saying? Right? Who made up the term Orthodox? A Reform rabbi in the beginning of the 19th century. Because it's brilliant. It's a great idea, right? Because then, we're Reform and they're Orthodox, and therefore there's two options of Judaism. There aren't two options of Judaism, right? There's Judaism, as Rav said. There aren't multiple smorgasbord here. Anyway, so Tzadok and Baitus had a smaller, less known group called the Baitusim, and this would break out into a massive sectarian time where what do sects do? You can then make up your own level of Judaism around your lifestyle, much like the Greeks did. They started with the gods, they worked backwards and said, this is the way I want to live, let me philosophize it and theologize it and make it all smooth, and so I can indulge my every appetite and then wake up the next morning guilt-free. Perfect, great system. The Tzedukim then, so the day in the life of the Jews, you didn't realize I was going to go off on this, right? You just asked an innocent question 2 minutes ago, right? But meanwhile, the Jews then were getting totally seduced by this Greek lifestyle, right? They would go to the Olympic Games, whoa, athletics. They would build unnecessary muscle. They would indulge in body and soul and spirit. They got intellectually involved in the philosophy and the mathematics of it all.
Being strong
Right?
is not good.
What's that?
Being strong is not good.
Oh, you want to digress into that one, huh? I didn't say that. You should be strong in the way I defined in Pirkei Avos. Conquer Yetzer Hara. That's really great. Oh, building unnecessary muscles so you can flex in the mirror and be arrogant. Oh, yeah. Oh, that sounds really good, yeah.
Something about the Book of Koheles. Is that not healthy though?
In an age when it's such a narcissistic age, and narcissist is another Greek myth, that people are so self-absorbed. Ironically, we have this thing called self-esteem. How do you say self-esteem in Hebrew? You can't. There is no word for it. It's a modern phrase that's an outgrowth of narcissism. When they call, the closest translation is bitachon, but our bitachon is we have trust in Hashem. They call it bitachon atzmi, self-confidence. We don't have any of it anymore, and that's why the most insecure, usually, the least self-confident people need to build outside muscles because they feel so bad about themselves. They need outside praise. Hey, look at you, you're so buff. So the Greeks moved in. The Jews just got gobsmacked. They just got into it, and then they were living between the worlds, and these sects gave them a whole justification. Now you're part of an entire movement, and it's anti-rabbinic. I mean, those rabbis, they're so stodgy and archaic. They're so stuck in the mud. They're not with it with the times. The youth got caught up in this. Complicated time. Do you know, in the entire First Temple period, how many people served in the role of Kohen Gadol? Gemara and Yuma? 12. 12. But come on, you're talking about 410 years. So 12 people served. That means they had great total over 410. But if you crunch the numbers, that's longevity. They each lived long lives. Only 12 Kohen Gadols. That also meant that they were each Tzedukim of stellar character. Second Temple period. This is how degenerate things got. How many people served in the role?
How many years was the Second Temple period?
420 years. Not much different. Well over 300.
What?
Most of them didn't survive the year, especially near the end as things got way out of control and the Tzedukim would bribe people for the job. You don't bribe your way into being the high priest. And what were they thinking? It was a power play because you were the high priest and it gave you certain ins with government officials and you could accept bribes and become very wealthy that way. It was corrupt to the top. And that's why this is famous. You know this on Yom Kippur. You're next. You know this on Yom Kippur. It got to the point, it was tragic. They had to tie a rope around the Kohen Gadol's ankle every time when he went on Yom Kippur, lifnai v'lifneim, into the Holy of Holies, because? Well,
He would die in there.
yeah, almost everybody did. And because you can't go in there, they had to drag the body out.
Is that true? Like for fact? Or they didn't have to just like
That's our tradition. Yes.
crazy.
Right. Why would they want the job? But they were so power hungry. They were so, why would a drug addict who knows that the next shot of heroin he's going to inject into his veins is going to maybe kill him, why would he inject it anyway? Why are people self-destructive? The Yetzer Hara gets up every day, the Gemara says, and tries to do nothing less than kill you. And people get so fixated on, I got to have this, I'm going to do this, and I'm different, I'm going to be immortal. They're not even thinking. It's wild, right? So a day in the life of the Second Temple period, what a complicated time. And you had bright lights. You had the likes of Shimon ben Shetach, who's one of the Zugos in the middle of this. Shimon ben Shetach, whose sister was very famous, Shlom Tzion, who's the queen, the one queen during that entire period for 9 years. But Shimon ben Shetach had to go into hiding because the Tzedukim were so powerful, they had a death warrant for him. So he and his students went out and they were almost starving. They were so poor. And one day they tried to do a little work in the field, and they needed to buy a cheap mule. So they go to a Yishmaeli, they go to an Arab. There were no Muslims, of course. Go to a descendant of Yishmael, and they bought a donkey. This is just to give you like a sense of the caliber of people. And the donkey had, unbeknownst to the non-Jewish owner, had a small priceless diamond around its neck. And they sold it to the guys, sold it to Shimon ben Shetach and his students. The students come running into Shimon ben Shetach by the name. Notice the Gedolei Hador have no titles still in this period. Shimon ben Shetach, that's his name. Titles will come near the end of the Second Temple period. Why? Why do rabbis suddenly have to have titles before their names? The bigger rabbis, Hillel, Shammai, Shmuel HaKatan says it all. Little Sam, Shmuel HaKatan. Yeah, why? They didn't need the esteem, the prestige. We're all insecure. We need titles. You ever call a doctor by his first name and he corrects you? I'm sorry, I went to medical school. I want every single initial after my name pronounced right now. They're so arrogant, right? Back in the day, arrogance was undid you. You were a guddle because of your humility, right? They only started needing the titles. The first person with the title was Rabbi Gamliel, the grandson of Hillel, the first Rabbi Gamliel. And the reason why they needed titles is because people had declined so drastically spiritually that the rabbinate itself had gone down in public esteem, and they needed to bolster the rabbis in people's eyes. Shimon ben Shetach, to finish the story, his students say, Rabbi, we just got rich. We're going to eat dinner tonight for the first time. We're going to sell the diamond and get money and go out and buy food so we can survive. Shimon tells his students, by the way, what's the halacha about that? If a non-Jew sells you a donkey,
If it's a goy, you can keep it.
why? What's the halacha? What category of halacha are we dealing with in this?
You can't steal from
It's called
Shabbos.
Yeah, say it out. Be confident and strong.
From Chranya.
Hashavas Aveda. The deen of Hashavas Aveda, the halacha of Hashavas Aveda, returning lost object is between Jews. Technically, you're exempt from doing it for a non-Jew unless he'll know. If he'll discover it, you should for sure return it. However, most people say to do, like Shimon ben Shetach. He said, return the diamond. Oh, but Rabbi, and quivering lower lip and everything. No, Rabbi, come on, we're hungry. Return the diamond. You will see no benefit. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. Hashem runs the world. You will see no benefit. Ill-gotten gains from a non-Jew. We learned from Avram Avinu 2 weeks ago in Parsha, we don't take gifts, handouts. Hashem will make it work out. They go to the Yishmaeli. They give him the diamond. Excuse me, this must be yours. Immediately, he says, Baruch Hashem shel Shimon ben Shetach. He recognizes these people are not real, right? And he says, Baruch Hashem, and they came into some money, and naturally, and they came into some food, and they survived, and they did just great. That's how we should be, and that's how they were in this period. Against all odds, under immense persecution, right? And yet they saw Kadosh Baruch Hu in their lives. By the way, there's a lot of modern stories. There's some modern stories to this effect too. Technically, you're exempt, but there's a recent story, not so recent anymore, 10 years ago, the couple in Waterbury. They bought on on Amazon. They got a desk.
Oh, it had like $40,000.
It had $70,000 in it,
They gave it back.
and they called up the owner and they said, "Excuse me, we have anything in the desk?" And she said, "Oh no."
It was in the news.
It was in the news, and it was what we call a Kiddush Hashem. There's an even more famous story of Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky early in his term as a rabbi back in Poland, in which a postal clerk, a non-Jewish postal clerk, returned too much change to a Jew. He went to Rav Yaakov. Rav Yaakov said, return the money. But Rabbi, return the money. But Rabbi, return the money. He returns the money. Sometime after that, Kadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. Rav Yaakov himself, as a young rabbi, goes to the same post office, goes to the same clerk, not planned. The clerk now is thinking, that was just a fluke. These people, those Jews, they're money grubbing. That's a caricature, right? Shylock is the money grubbing Jew, right? So it's all a caricature. I'm going to test him. I'm going to give him too much money and see what happens. And indeed, Rav Yaakov counts the change. Excuse me, I think there's a mistake. You gave me too much. That postal clerk was a well-placed public official who, when the Nazis rose, Rav Yaakov had gotten out. Baruch Hashem, he's already in America. But when he was well-placed during the time of the Nazi invasion, he was in the position to save many Jews. He said, those people's lives we save. So do the right thing in the present. You don't know HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plans. Just do the right thing. It'll work out. Anyway, that's the caliber of the people in those days. I have more stories if you want me to continue, but I'll take questions. I think Aryeh, then Adam.
What made the Jews, like in the time of the first base of Mikdash, ever want to do idols? They were so close to Hashem at that time.
It's a great question, and we have 3 more minutes. So let me do it quickly, and I'll try to take your question too. Remember this Yetzer Hara for idolatry? Ravenous, powerful, and the opposite was immense spirituality. You had prophecy. You could just daven from the heart, right? It was the same force. So great, upstanding people
They saw it
would just see it. Even intellectually, it's ridiculous. What do they see in these ridiculous little idols? And yet there was such a passion for it. It was what we were describing before. Why would the heroin addict want to shoot himself up? He can see what it is. His veins are gangrened. But he can't control himself. In a famous Gemara in Sanhedrin, the end of the Gemara period, Rav Ashi sees Menashe Melech, who's one of the big Rishaim who got involved with idolatry, in a dream. It's a famous story. And Menashe shows what a great Talmid Chacham he had been, even though he's guilty of some of the greatest sins of all time. He's on some level responsible for the destruction of the first temple. And Rav Ashi, in his dream, asked Menashe HaMelech, you're so smart, you know so much. Your question, how could you follow idolatry? And Menashe tells him, you don't know what it's like. You've never had anything remotely similar to this driving power of desire towards idolatry. If you were alive then, you would pick up your coattails and publicly debase yourself and run after the idols. It was a force that we have nothing like it, but we have sort of something like it in the form of the Yetzer. Some good people do some really bad things. That much you know. We can tell stories, let's not. That kind of thing.
Why do our Jews always describe this like money grubbing? Like you said,
We
where
in
does
the
that
banks.
come from?
We in the banks.
I'm going to try. It's now officially we're over, but I'll try to give you a very short. It's a great question, spot on. I'll try to give you a historical, technical answer for it. It's the church's fault, because even though they don't have an obligation in the Christian religion of keeping the mitzvahs, for some reason selectively they did, and between at least other Christians, between one another, they don't lend money with interest. Okay, usury is forbidden among Christians irrationally, and anybody who knows basic economy knows that if you have no interest and you don't, especially as the economy of the world changed and became increasingly not yet capitalistic but moving in that direction, if you have no loans, you have no economy. The whole thing falls apart because people need capital. If you want to do a venture, and to be an entrepreneur, you need money. But if you're not going to lend the money because I'm not getting interest on the money, then the whole thing comes to a standstill. But Christians in their religion did not forbid Jews from lending on interest. So they became reliant on Jewish bankers and people to lend money on interest. They became therefore the fulcrum of the economy of the society. And because they were often the loan collectors, the caricature of Shylock in The Merchant of Venice of Shakespeare is illustrative of this, that was the role that they were, by no choice of their own, put in because they weren't given any other jobs. They didn't have a chance to have other kind of livelihood, so that became their... So ironically, the oppressor, the Christians, forced the Jews, by lack of any other options, into that position and then resented them for it.